Hello my little subscribers, it's time for another video. Okay, so I've been reading Mutant Year Zero Elysium, the fourth, I think it was, RPG in the Mutant Year Zero series, and they're all pretty good, and I highly recommend you give them a look-see because they're good. But, and something that's always fascinated me about these games was the idea of where are they set. Now, to give you some context, the books never state where the any of the RPG is set, with the minor exception that the robot game is takes place underwater, but that's not really a location the same way we know it in the sense of land. But they never explain where the game takes place, and there's a reason for that. One, they don't want to tie it down to one location, which is fair, and the game doesn't really rely on where it is. You can easily set anywhere from America to Africa to China, and it doesn't matter. It's pretty vague in its location. But, and another reason they do it is because the people who make it are Scandinavian. They come from Sweden. Yeah, Sweden, I think. And, they come from Sweden, but they often sell to an English-speaking American audience. So they don't tie down a lot of their RPGs to that region, because they want to keep it universal appeal, so they don't have to worry about things that don't make sense to someone outside of their own homeland, because the game isn't specific enough to matter. And that's actually pretty clever when selling to an international market. If you don't need to set a location, like, it's the post-apocalypse, you can be pretty vague, and they do it, and it's pretty smart. But I've always been curious about where is it set. Where exactly do these events take place? Now, of course, it's all speculation on my part, and I'm all speculating here just for the sake of fun, and this is by no means a guarantee I found something. This is just me speculating for the sake of fun. Anyway, let's get on to my theory on something interesting I noticed. Okay, so if you look at Mutant Year Zero Elysium, what I like to call the human game, the ruling houses. If you don't understand what I'm talking about here, I look up a video of the wiki on it, or just buy the book. The book is great, so beautiful. But anyway, the ruling houses, it has like a list of common names. What are the common names of the ruling classes? And something funny I noticed is that William or Wilhelm or something isn't among the common ruling names, which is odd because as far as ever since about William the Conqueror, it's always been popular in the English-speaking Germanic world. And it's always and William is spread, like Wilhelm or William, depending on how you want to count it, spread pretty wide. It's common enough all over Europe. You can go to France or Scandinavia and find a William if you look hard enough. But it's always been super common. Oh, and for the sake of this discussion, just assume that William, Wilhelm, and Will are basically just the same name for this discussion. They do have some slight differences in how to spell them, but practically for this discussion, they're the same thing. They've always been popular in two regions. One, Germany, specifically the Prussian region very heavily, and two, England and all of its colonies, so like America, Canada, Australia. It's always been a common name since William the Conqueror, and in Germany, Wilhelm has been popular since who knows when. It's pretty old. Now, the thing is, why isn't it a common name? This might sound like a small detail, but it is kind of weird, isn't it? A name that has been super popular both among low-class people and high-class people for 1,000 years, more or less, all of a sudden isn't, and the game doesn't take place that far in the future. We don't know exactly how long, but it can't be more than 200 or 300 years or so. It has to be pretty close. So why would it go from one of the most popular names ever? Like, as far as we know, like in places like England, it's never left the top 20 ever since we started counting it. And why would it all of a sudden just kind of disappear? Now, I do want to make a small note. The common names of the worker class do have two names that sound kind of like William or Wilhelm. Like, I'll put them up here, but they don't exactly sound like it to me, and there still isn't the William or Wilhelm or Will that we see in other places. So, I don't know if these are directly related, and it could be a hole in my theory, but these are like the world-class workers. I'm talking about the high-class ruling stuff. Why would they not associate with the name Will? Now, let me go. Now, I have two theories on this. Now, the third one is, there are really three. One, they just didn't add it. They thought it made it sound too common, and it made it sound too tied down to our world, and that's a fair assumption. But I'm going with the possibility that this is more intentional than just they didn't think of it, or they didn't want to tie it down too much to our world. Okay? So I'm making, caveat here. Second theory, there are two main theories I have for this. The symbolic answer and the practical political answer. The political, I don't mean real political. Symbolic answer is we look to the meaning of the name William or Wilhelm. Now, in general, there are a few different ways to read it, kind of. more like what specific word you use, but in general, the name William generally implies to a strong leader of some type. Like, one of the most common ways it's like mentioned or it's mean today is the determined defender. Basically, the idea of someone who will defend their people to the last, very determined, very strong-willed, and willing to fight for what they desire. Usually portrayed in a good light. The idea that they are a noble hero or someone defending their people for what's right. And no, this isn't just me tooting my own horn because I have that name. This is me actually saying the name. Like, once again, it kind of varies a little bit from where you look up your definition, but in general, that's the main theme. Like a strong desire to defend and a determination to do so. And something I find kind of interesting is that the ruling House of Elysium do not do this. They don't defend their own. They are willing to commit horrible atrocities against their own people just to gain more power, aka the opposite of what the name William would say. William, like the name, if theoretically if a character was going by the meaning of the name William as their personality or desire, they would be defending their people, doing whatever it takes to save them. They wouldn't be like kidnapping, murdering, and doing other horrible crimes just to accrue power for it. That would go against their very desire. Once again, the determined defender, they defend their people, not destroy them or attack them for power. So I think if we're going by symbolic meaning, this is like a symbolic way of showing that the ruling houses do not care for their people. They are not determined in their defense. They just want power. They don't care who they're being up to do it. This is a symbolic answer. Now I'm going to go to the practical answer. And I do admit, this goes a bit more into Crazy Town, as the symbolic answer has a clear explanation of how it works. Now I wanted to think about this. I wanted to think, well, okay, with all the names they have here, they do list as ruling names. What do those names mean? Now, I went to a site and I searched in every single name, and that was a lot. And it took me a bit, and I'm pretty sure I forgot some of them because I was like 4 p.m. in the morning, I think. But I did my research, and a lot of them I don't think are actual names. I think they're made-up names or just not common enough to have a true meaning, or at least not a common one. Some of them are random, like one of them comes from like Africa, so I think like you get this kind of a lot of them just seem to be kind of either made to sound unique or made to sound generic enough that it could be anywhere, which is likely so anyone could set it anywhere and not sound like it comes specifically from one region. But I did notice a pattern of form. Now this is a small pattern, but I think it has some merit. Is that a lot of the names that come here that have like an English or Germanic root all state to have gone out. It's our style, roughly around the time of the Norman Conquest, aka when the name William became popular in England, because, William the Conqueror. They were all a lot of them were names that were popular before the Normans came to England. So, I think that might mean something. Now, my theory about this is that whatever group made Elysium, the four houses and those guys, might have had a grudge against either England or Germany. Particularly England, I think, is likely. Because here's something else. The game actually states they modeled the society to some extent off of 19th century society, the Victorian age. But William was once again a very common name at that time. So to model your society off of one thing and then exclude a very weirdly specific aspect of it means that I think it was intentional. This is my political answer for the game, is that if that Elysium, whoever they were against, since they were involved in some wars, one of those groups might have been either England, Germany, or some group heavily tied to them. Maybe the Normans, maybe there was like a Norman rebirth or something, and they got into a fight with them. As part of their propaganda against them, they struck out the name as a sort of blow. Maybe their leader was named William again. It's not unlikely. Now, this might sound crazy, but they actively state that Elysium does propaganda. They do lost stuff like Big Brother from 1984. So I don't find it hard to believe that a group, if they were at war with someone who had a heavy Normannic, Germanic, or English roots, if they had a heavy grudge against them, like doing to a fight, that they might not strike out that name from the records, seeing it as a traitor name. The name of a traitor. Only a traitor would use the name William. And seeing it as just a name that only a traitor would use. So that leads to me that I think they might be some kind of Normans, or maybe the current nation of England. But I heavily suspect that the Elysium is set in Europe somewhere. But I could be wrong, it's hard for me to tell. And this really only tells me that I think they aren't set in Germany, England, Normandy, or have some heavy connection to those places. Anyway, that's just a small little thing that I think is funny. not funny, but interesting. It's interesting, and I don't know, maybe I just think of nothing, but I think it's worth noting, at least in my opinion. It's interesting. But I do think if there's any meaning behind the fact that William isn't considered a name, a common name among the people, by the ruling class, I mean, is that purely just, if it has any meaning, it's purely a symbolic meaning, meant to show that they don't, that they aren't interested in the defense of the people, because a lot of the names that do have meanings don't make any reference to, like, strong defenders or heroic protectors. They don't have that reference. So it's probably, if it's anything, it's purely just a symbolic reference that the houses do not protect their people, unlike the name William or Wilhelm would imply. They aren't the determined defenders of the people, they're the traitors who stabbed them in the back. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that video. It's purely just me speculating for the sake of fun, but hope you liked it. Yeah? Hey, why don't you hit that sub button? You're gonna become a subscribble. Get to see my content quicker. Wouldn't that be nice? I bet so.